Maybe he'll become the Witch King of Angstmar. Welcome to the Rings of Power podcast. We're the Lorehounds, your guides to Tolkien's world of Middle-earth. I'm John.
I'm Marilyn, and this is our feedback episode, right, John?
It sure is. We didn't write an intro, so nice improvisation there.
Hey, I'm getting this stuff, you know?
Yeah, so we did a mid-season feedback roundup, and now it's been a few more episodes. We're here to talk about people's feedback for episodes 5 and 6. Then I think we're going to come back one more time at the end of the season and talk about the last 2 episodes. So that's where we are at this point, because it's just a lot of podcasting. We got the main cast, we got the lore cast, and now these supplemental feedback episodes. David could not be here tonight, if you haven't noticed. So we're all trading off now.
Right. Well, fair. That's fine.
Yeah, that's the beauty of having 3 co-hosts.
Absolutely.
Is that we can all, somebody feels under the weather, like I did last week, David does tonight. And the other 2 can go on and fulfill the prophecies of
and
Tolkien.
have a wonderful time doing it.
Exactly. So it's just going to be you and me tonight, and I think on the Lorecast too. But David is on the main recap, which we recorded last night, but is not out because of the magic of podcasting.
But it is a magical episode nonetheless.
It sure is. Yeah, we had a great time, great conversation. So I just want to say this is coming out after episode 7. So I'm going to say we can talk spoilers through episode 7. So if you have not watched through episode 7, turn away.
Yes,
because I don't think I could possibly go back in time and not talk about what I've already seen now.
It becomes very difficult to separate out, which episode did this happen in? So, you know, that's just the way we roll, folks. And apologies if that disturbs anybody at some point.
Well, that's all right. We've got the team here. We're ready to go. If you want to send in feedback, you can do that at lotr@thelorehounds.com. You can go to the website, thelorehounds.com, and use the contact form or the voicemail feature. You can go on your phone and record a voice memo. You can email that to us at lotr@thelorehounds.com. And yeah, I want to just give a big thank you to Nancy.
Nancy.
Collecting all the feedback, collating it nicely. Would you want to talk about Nancy, Marilyn? I feel
Nancy is wonderful. Nancy is a treasure. I love that she's taken on a second career, quote unquote. We're both sound like we're both in the same stages of our lives vis-a-vis careers and whatnot. And wow, she's just jumped in with both feet and doing all kinds of wonderful things for us. So Eglario, lightate, Nancy.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's time we get started. Let's get into the feedback.
Do it.
Just as a reminder, if you want the Lorecast and if you want the show guide, you can head to the show notes, go to the link tree. Season pass is $10. It's one time forever, or you can join a recurring subscription and get all of our goodies. That's the last time I'll do salesmanship till the outro, so don't worry.
There we go.
And to start off...
Yes, we have one from Aotearoa, otherwise known as New Zealand, which is very exciting.
Yes. Would you like to read it?
I will happily read it. Hi, David, John, and Marilyn. I host Cast of the Rings, a LOTR podcast on the Podcastica network. Thank you so much for your awesome podcast. Well, thank you. That's very kind, Anwin. I am especially enjoying the Silmarillion stories to help me through my second reading of the book. There you go, John. Well done, you. It is so interesting to dive back into this lore as an accompaniment to the Rings of Power. The showrunners are doing a great job of bringing us juicy bits of lore while keeping the casual viewer engaged. It's a bit of a balancing act, isn't it? And I agree. They're doing a good job there.
Yeah.
I am enjoying listening to your breakdowns each week, though I always wait until after we've recorded. Also avoid any online discussions so we can record fresh. Yeah, I know what she means. Or he. I'm assuming she. I shouldn't, but I know what they mean. There, I'll get it right. It's really tricky to be sure that I want to come to it just with my own experience and views and so forth, and then I'll listen to what other people have to say. And sometimes it's like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I want to say I did listen to Anwen's podcast and really enjoyed what I heard. I haven't listened to everything just yet because, we're busy, and I also try to keep my opinions pretty pure for the season, but then I'll go back after the season and I'll listen to other stuff. And really great work. And I would just want to thank you, podcaster to podcaster, for writing in and for recommending our podcast and all that. And yeah, good luck with the rest of the season. I've been meaning to write you an email back, and it will come if it hasn't by the time this airs.
And props to you for getting screeners. And being very careful not to watch too far ahead. It's a real temptation, isn't it?
It is.
And thanks for giving recommendations, the Lorehounds. That's wonderful. And wow, you were an extra on the Two Towers. You'll have to tell your story about that sometime, I hope.
This is very exciting.
And a Lord of the Rings tour guide for 2 years. I wonder if you are tour guide for any of the tours that I went on when I did the Lord of the Rings tours of Aotearoa.
Now, the question is, what kind of an extra were you? What species were you?
Yeah, well, there were an awful lot of orc extras, I know, that I ran across in my travels, so could be.
Fair enough.
Or maybe they were an elf, who knows?
Fair enough. Yeah, you never know. All right.
Hanonle Melonin. Thank you. Thank you very much, Anwen. Lovely to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks, Anwen. Hope you write in again, and let's get in touch. I'm always looking for new guests for Silmarillion stories.
There you go. That would be a lovely pairing, I think.
Yeah. All right, Michael L. writes in and says, "Hi, David, John, and Marilyn. Huge fan of the show. I've really been enjoying Rings of Power and loving all your content on the First and Second Age lore. I've read the appendices of the Silmarillion a few times. I think... Oh, and the Silmarillion. I was like, it's appendices of the Silmarillion.
No.
Appendices and the Silmarillion a few times. And had a quick question about Eärendil. I was catching up on a past podcast about Rings of Power Season 1, Episode 3. John and David mentioned that Eärendil was the son of Beren and Luthien and therefore had some Maiar blood. It was my understanding from the published Silmarillion that Eärendil's parents were Tuor and Idril, that it was his wife, Elrond's mother, that was Beren and Luthien's granddaughter and carried Maiar blood. I know Tolkien is known to contradict some parentage details, so I wasn't sure if this was from some other writings. Apologies if you already addressed this in a later episode and I missed it. Thanks again for all that you do. Godspeed and Namarie." Yeah, thanks. I just want to say, because you weren't on that podcast, Marilyn, so I'll do the correction.
Right.
Yeah, I may have corrected it on a later podcast. I don't remember if I did.
You did.
I did. Okay.
Or at least it came up again in a subsequent podcast, and we clarified and we went down the whole ancestry line fairly recently too, I think.
Maybe I should. Yeah, I think. Well, I think we even talked about it on this week's recap, which did not come out by the time Michael wrote this email.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's Elwing that comes from Beren and Luthien. I think probably what was in my head when I wrote down that in the outline was that Elrond is kind of the merging of all of these Elvish lines. But I just misspoke, and I apologize to the peoples of Middle Earth for getting their lineages wrong. So thanks for bringing that up, Michael. Maybe I should record a little bit like, "Hey, it's future John. This was wrong."
There you go. In your copious amounts of spare time. Sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, one day I'll do an edit to that episode.
Okay. Next, we hear from Jourdain M.
Mm-hmm.
Salut all! Quickie this time, I promise.
Well, wait. Jordan is going to be mad if I don't read the French.
Oh, but I wanted to use
Okay, all right. How about this? You do it, and then after every French phrase, I will attempt it to please Jordan. Because Jordan's goal in life is to make me say as many French words as possible. So I'm going to make sure that I honor that request, and I'm going to repeat any French phrases after you.
Okay, well, here's the first one. Salut all.
Salut.
No T in the end. Quickie this time, I promise. Whilst sad I couldn't indeed torture John with some French, but you have succeeded in that goal, Jourdain. Marilyn, ton français est impeccable. Bravo.
Ton français est impeccable.
You forgot the bravo. Merci bien, Jourdain. Vous êtes trop gentil. John, my husband, turned to me at some point to ask why I suddenly pulled out my phone and was frantically typing. I had to explain. Well, John just straight washed Rufus, chérie. You want to try a chérie?
Sherry.
Only to be quickly relieved by your own rapid fact-checking. So, hashtag John marked safe from the Montreal gay community. Haha.
Oh, that's excellent. I don't need that on my tail. You know, I don't need a whole group hunting me down.
No.
Let me know that Rufus Wainwright is indeed a gay man.
I think it could be, yes, a difficult moment if that were to come about. He continues, shout out always to David, too, and Nancy for her excellent editing and PR work. Bon?
John? Oh, I'm sorry. That was my cue. Bon.
Off to watch episode 5 and then spend the day's chores listening to my new season pass. Ha Cheers, nice. Mes amis.
Mes amis. Uh-huh. That's my French accent. Hope everyone enjoys. I learned it in Ratatouille.
I was going to say, it sounds like you got it from some movie or other, so Ratatouille sounds about right.
Well, thank you, Jordan. I really do appreciate you. Your mission in life to make me say as many Québécois phrases as I can. All right.
Salut, Jordan.
Message on a body, not to be confused with message in a bottle. Oh, okay. All right. I see what you're doing there.
That was Nancy, yes.
Yeah. All right. So it's Neil now wrote in and said, I have some linguistic questions. The message on the body was written in the alphabet of Khuzdul, the language of the dwarves. However, Black speech has no alphabet of its own. I'm assuming the message is actually in Black speech. To my knowledge, we as the audience have only seen Black speech in Tengwar as the inscription on the ring. Why did Adar write it in Khuzdul and not Tengwar? Adar doesn't know Khuzdul. He knows Black speech, Westron, and Quenya, which is why he should use Tengwar. Is it possible one of the Uruks is multilingual? Could this be another aspect of their culture? An Uruk linguist? Seems unlikely, but honestly, I love that possibility. Do we think that they, Adar and the Uruks, use Khuzdul to confuse Celebrimbor or the ruler of the region, assuming they don't actually know Celebrimbor specifically? I don't know. Adar knew about the Elven Rings too. So was it to make Celebrimbor think the dwarves sent it, but also get the message across to Anatar? Maybe it would have been too obvious to send it in Tengwar because the elves would know automatically that it's not Sindarin. But it's unclear if they could know if it's not Quenya, as most of them probably don't speak that either. But Celebrimbor would have been able to read Quenya and would have probably recognized it as Black speech. Why does Adar care? Why wouldn't he want to out Anatar as Sauron writing Black speech on the body? Why be so cryptic? Just to mess with Anatar? Maybe it wasn't physically possible because there wasn't enough room on the body. So what I want to know is which Uruk speaks Khuzdul. Maybe they are just telling the story that Adar is a linguist and knows all the languages, and that's that. Well, he certainly had a lot of time to learn the languages, hasn't he?
Well, yes, he has, but in point of fact, the actuality is a little bit different from what It's Neil now is positing. If you go to the appendices in Lord of the Rings on the languages, we learned that the Kirth, otherwise known as the runes, were actually first devised in Beleriand by Sindar elves.
Ah.
So you need to not confuse the alphabet with the language. You can use an alphabet to write in any language you want, with a little squidging around and variations for some alphabets that don't have some of the letters or sounds or whatever that another alphabet might. So it was mostly used only for, note, for scratched or incised inscriptions, for names and memorials on wood or stone. And this was the first thing I thought of was, well, of course they wouldn't use Tengwar because that would be virtually impossible to carve into flesh. You're going to use runes however you came to know about them. But in this case, presumably Adar learned about runes when he was in Beleriand because it was the elves who invented runes.
Yeah.
They
No,
spread
that's really
east.
interesting, Marilyn.
Yeah, they spread east in the Second Age, which is the age we're in now. And the Kirth were used by elves, humans, dwarves, and orcs. And they were somewhat altered by each of the peoples that used them. So we're so accustomed to saying, okay, runes equals dwarves. But in fact, that's not the case. Runes have been used by all the peoples that we know of that used writing at all.
Mm.
Then Dairon developed his own particular version of the Kirth while he was in Doriath that was used in Eregion and spread from there to Khazad-dûm. So the elves actually had it before the dwarves did.
You know, how did the guy have the time after tattling on Beren and Luthien all day?
You gotta wonder. Right? Maybe he's trying to make up for it somehow. And then here's a quote. It is said that black speech was devised by Sauron in the Dark Years, which are another name for the Second Age. So here we are in the middle of it. And that he wanted it to be the language of all his servants, though that didn't work out. After his first overthrow, only the Nazgul maintained the language of black speech until Sauron returned to Mordor. So I think that answers an awful lot of Neil's suppositions and questions and whatnot. The runes were everywhere. Everybody knew them. Everybody used them for their own alphabets who wanted to. And they're primarily used for carving things, which, you know, can turn your stomach a little if you think about the actual instance we're talking about here. And the black speech was already around at this point. We've already seen it used in many instances. I don't think that's just the showrunners, you know, twiddling things for their own convenience. It's actually in the appendices, which, of course, they have permission to use in Lord of the Rings. So I hope that clarifies it all. I don't know. Is there anything I missed, John?
I think that's it. I think the only other thing I would clarify is I think actually more people speak Quenya than Neil is alluding to in Eregion. It is the language of lore, but that means that if you want to go read like an old lore book, then you have to speak Quenya. And it's sure. It seems like, from my understanding, like all the annals of these cities are being written in Quenya. You can't.
I would think so.
And also, Thingol's gone. The ban on Sindarin is gone. Like they could openly speak Quenya, and nobody's going to stop them.
You mean the ban on Quenya is gone?
Yeah.
And let's remember, Adar was in his origins an elf.
Yeah.
And we don't know how long he lived as an elf until he was taken and tortured and twisted, etc., etc. But
right,
he lived through it all. I mean, I wonder if he is of the same age as Círdan.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. Speculate, I suppose.
Well, thanks, Neil. That sparked an interesting lore drop by Marilyn.
Yeah, you definitely got me going on that one, Neil, so thanks.
You want to read about Sauron's master plan with double T from Melbourne?
I will indeed do that. Greetings. My take on Sauron's machinations in this episode seem to be different from the podcasts I've listened to, including yours. So maybe I'm way off, but this is how I saw it. This guy is spinning wheels within wheels, and it's as glorious to watch as it is diabolical. Yeah, no argument there, although I'm not sure I think it's glorious, but diabolical, absolutely. He continues, I believe that he has created the shortage of mithril by squirreling away his own stash. Obviously to be used for his One Ring project and in general as established by Tolkien. Sauron covets mithril above all other earthly materials. He waits for it to be noted by others that the mithril is all gone, stalling the project. He then waits for Celebrimbor to ask him to deal with it. As planned, this has him go to Khazad-dûm to appeal to the dwarves. I believe that Sauron's primary goal here is not the mithril at all, but to use King Durin's greed at the prospect of untold wealth and riches to motivate him to accelerate his mithril mining operations. The goal being to reach the Balrog, awaken it, and cause their destruction, or at least in the hope of gaining it as an ally. The scene was brilliantly done, with one hint at Sauron's true motivation being the quick focus on the flaming torch. I assume that means the fire in the basket with the Balrog flashing out. I'd encourage you to watch that scene again with Sauron's Unleash the Balrog plan in mind. Let's remember that Durin's Bane's Balrog is a Maiar and a former servant of Morgoth, just like Sauron. They're kind of old co-workers. Yeah, well.
Yeah, I like that description.
They might not have met. I mean, it was a big enterprise, right? But still.
That's true. Yeah. It's like, I think Sauron is more of a Bezos to an Amazon worker that that the Balrog would be.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe a VP.
Besides,
maybe
the
VP.
Balrogs reported directly to Morgoth. So I think they would probably consider themselves on an equal plane with Sauron. I don't think that Sauron would consider it that way.
Yeah. I think Sauron kind of, sometimes companies will run with they have their regular hierarchies and then they have like a loose cannon kind of. I think Sauron is kind of the loose cannon, right? He was kind of allowed to do a lot of what he wanted in the first age, and he, had very creative malice.
Sure, up to a point. And at the end of the day, John, is it not, in fact, all about project management?
It is all about project management. I like that that's catching on. I'm very proud of that one.
I can see where you are. So getting back to the message here. So Sauron's manipulating events to create a mithril shortage and using that to bring the dwarves closer to the Balrog. And keep in mind that it's the ring that Sauron himself corrupted and gave to King Durin that is fueling the king's greed and allowing Sauron's plan to work. Then, upon returning to Eregion, I think he brings forth some of the mithril that he's been stashing away, telling Celebrimbor that the dwarves gave it to him. Meanwhile, the armies of orcs that he lured from Mordor to Eregion are at its gates. The dwarves are closing in on unleashing the Balrog. The 9 rings of men are almost finished, and he no doubt plans to slink away from it all and with a takeaway bag of mithril. Let's also note that unleashing the Balrog not only pays off by driving the dwarves out of Khazad-dûm, but also in mutually killing Sauron's greatest threat in the Third Age, Gandalf, which all panned out perfectly for him until the Valar intervened and respawned Gandalf. I'm not sure there was that much foreknowledge of what was going to happen, even among the Valar.
Yeah.
I think that was Eru's response to, I'm even wearing my Spibimi shirt tonight.
Spibimi.
Yes, shall prove
Can we say what Spibimi is before we
of
get
course.
some questions?
Spibimi is a term coined by the wonderful folks at the Prancing Pony podcast. It stands for Shall Prove But Mind Instrument. SPBMI, Spibimi. Meaning, even the worst things that Morgoth or any of his subsequent evil cohorts ever do can be used by Eru Ilúvatar to bring about a greater good that nobody had even imagined.
Right. Makes sense to me.
Makes sense to me, too. Let's see. Takeaway bag of mithril. And respawning Gandalf. Enormous credit has to go to the writers for constructing most of this because the source materials reveal only a vague hint at Sauron's manipulation in creating the ring. Thanks and loving the podcast. Well, there's some stuff in here that I'm not sure that I'm quite on board with. And of course, we're at the advantage now in future history. I'm assuming this email was written before the episode in which we saw that, in fact, that mithril was nowhere near being mithril. It was an illusion.
We just are at an information advantage because we watched episode 7. So now we know there was no mithril to be had anyway.
Right.
It was all the blood of Sauron.
Right. And I think you could read the flash of the Balrog in the flame there as Sauron went past in a number of ways.
Right.
But, the one presented here in this feedback is certainly as viable as any other because they don't really specify it too much. I also think it's important that we keep in mind the difference between what the showrunners are doing and what Tolkien is doing.
Yeah.
Because they're not the same thing. And I'm not saying better or worse on either side. I'm just saying sometimes some of the things you're seeing are actually the creations of the showrunners based on Tolkien's material.
Well, let's talk about mithril some more because Kaiser came in with an email that basically pretty well predicted this episode. Kaiser wrote, and again, before episode 7 ever came out, "Hi all, so this question of the week is, where did Sauron get the mithril? I have another question. Are we sure it's mithril?" This is presented during the deception of Celebrimbor. Could it be some other substance with much more of Sauron's taint, a backdoor into the 9 that will allow him to control them? And if it is mithril, perhaps it was some that he squirreled away earlier to work on in secret. Let's face it, he didn't try particularly hard to get more mithril at Khazad-dûm, did he? Hey, can I have some mithril, Durin? No. Well, okay, never mind. Bye. Also, I must admit, I did think the dwarves were pulling fully formed coins and chalices out of the rock at first. Haha.
Well, I think Kaiser deserves some internet points, or at least a bowl of
Absolutely.
cereal, because in fact, we now know from episode 7 that it was absolutely some other substance with much more of Sauron's taint. Not as much Sauron's taint as you could get.
Yes, your delivery truck full of internet points will be arriving in about 3 business days.
Project management. Gotta love it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've got a voicemail next.
Oh, we do. Yes.
Yeah.
Shall I read it?
No, I have a recording.
Oh, that's right. Duh.
That's all right. All right, here we go.
Hi, everyone. It's Vanessa from San Jose. Just hope you're having a great week. Wanted to call in. I just finished listening to the latest episode and had a quick comment. There was a question about what Celebrimbor might bring to the Rings of Power that Sauron himself couldn't bring. And I think the thing that he brings is legitimacy. Celebrimbor is known throughout the power circles of Middle-earth. He's known to be wise. He's known to be kind. He's known to be extremely talented. He's the master craftsman of the age. He's trusted. He's well regarded. He's respected. So if he shows up, or if one of his representatives shows up and says, look, Celebrimbor made these rings of power for you. They're going to help you elevate your people. They're going to help you solve your problems. These are his gift to you. That's going to be met with a lot more trust, with a lot more legitimacy. As I said before, people aren't going to second guess that. They're not going to believe that Celebrimbor would give them something that would be harmful. As opposed to Anatar, or Sauron in his Anatar persona, who would be coming in going, hey, my name's Anatar. You don't know me from Adam, but I made these rings of power for you, and would you please just put them on and use them? You can trust me. They're going to be great. You're going to love it. Best thing ever. People are going to look at him and go, first off, who the heck are you? And where did you come from? And they're going to just meet that with a lot of skepticism, with a lot of trepidation, with just a lot of caution and uncertainty. And so that's going to cause Sauron's plans to be not realized as quickly as he probably wants them to be. At least that's the impression I get from the show, that he's trying to move on this quickly. In the books, it seems it takes a little longer, and that's okay. Anyway, those were my 2 cents. Do with them what you will, and have a great week, and talk to you later. Bye.
Well, if I can do what I will with them, I will agree with them. I think that's a great point, is that Celebrimbor, you're right, is very well regarded amongst the peoples of Middle-earth, and he had that problematic grandpa, but we don't cancel people based on their grandpa. So yeah, I think that's a great point. Is the dwarves, he's besties with them, they'll take him. The elves, he's an elven lord of the what is it, the second most powerful elven realm within Middle-earth at this point. So yeah, I think that's a great point. That's a great point. It's a distribution method, right? Project management. We need the distribution network.
Well, certainly I agree that Celebrimbor's reliability was a key factor in persuading the dwarves to bring the mithril to make the dwarven rings. Mm-hmm. My question was more about the actual manufacturing process. The show keeps seeming to tell us that Sauron cannot make them by himself. If he could, he would. And the whole part of the season where he keeps, episode 7. Sorry, I can go ahead and talk about all this now.
Episode 7.
So he's created the imaginary bubble for Celebrimbor to work endlessly, not knowing how many days and nights are passing. He chains them to the table and says, finish them, and so forth. Clearly, there is something that Celebrimbor has or knows that he has not shared with Sauron, that Sauron doesn't know or can't figure out. He needs Celebrimbor to do this. And that's the part that I find interesting. And in the books, it does take a little longer to make rings, as in 500 years
Hmm.
or longer. It's a very long spread of time. So,
And also, doesn't Anatar say to Celebrimbor in this episode, in episode 7, I've learned so much from him.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, so he does acknowledge, like, this is something that I did not know how to do before.
I really think that's the case. And, the final test, as if you will, is the 9 rings for humans. And, will it work if I use some of my own blood?
Right.
And of course, he won't know until he actually has some. We'll try them on and see what happens, presumably.
Right.
But ultimately, he will go off. Sauron will go off by himself to Mount Doom and forge the One Ring. At least that's seems to be the trajectory that they're on. So,
yep. Well, you want to read Layla's next?
Sure thing. Layla writes on Discord. My theory on Sauron and Adar and the orcs is that Sauron can basically mind control the orcs to do his bidding, because he essentially, quote-unquote, made them. I feel like he will use them to destroy Eregion and then force them to kill the only father that they have ever known, Adar. And that will cement the orcs worshipping Sauron but also fearing and hating him. They will be forced to kill the one being who truly loved them and cared for them, and they will have nothing left but hatred and fear.
I think this is another time where the information deficit, where now we have episode 7 in our heads and Layla didn't at this time,
right,
is that I think the orcs are actually starting to resent Adar as of episode
I do too.
7.
I do, and I've even floated it out there, the possibility that it may be that Daddy Orc is going to kill Adar.
I think we may be in for a worm-tongued Saruman situation.
Something like that, yeah. And Sauron did not make the orcs. Morgoth made the orcs.
Yes, that was my other thing that piqued my ears. I think perhaps Sauron had, we don't know, but perhaps Sauron had, an assistant role. But he was the Murdania to Morgoth on this. He wasn't the Celebrimbor making the orcs.
Too soon, John, too soon.
Yeah, we can't. We pour one out for Murdania again.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that he just stepped in after, clearly he had plenty of plenty of orc legions under his command.
Orc lore.
Obeying him, he had given them orders to never pass him in his the tower that he had stolen from Finrod, but without reporting in, and that's why he caught Beren in that group of elves disguised as orcs, because they tried to sneak past without reporting in. So there's definitely a long history of Sauron being in control of the orcs, but he did not himself create them.
I think you're right there.
But thank you for writing in, Layla.
Yes, definitely.
And, all speculations are of interest.
All right, let's go to Bending the Knee. We've got an email from Sarah L., who says, I wanted to hear more of your discussion on oaths and if I may equate that with pledging. I am asking this because I want to know if Tolkien was reflecting the times or if he was shedding light on his moral framework on your word. I am asking this in reference to the act of kneeling and pledging to Adar. It seems to me that the writing/show takes the position that if you kneel to Adar, you are therefore bad, and you are branded as bad. Yet the humans we see kneeling are in fear for their lives and are only doing it to survive. Is Tolkien saying that if you don't die for your principles or your way of life, you are bad or evil, on the wrong side, not to be trusted? Now, of course, I haven't read or watched the entire plotline of the story, but I refer to Estrid. She appears to regret the brand and the kneeling to Adar, and I could see myself wanting to live and kneeling also. But I don't think that my personality would change or that I was a bad person for surviving. And we see all this suspicion from Arondir. What is Tolkien trying to say? Is his world so black and white? Do you think it reflects the time in which he lived? Or do I have it all wrong and she does turn out to be a bad person? And if that is the case, what about Theo? He also has a brand. Does the brand turn your soul, or is the soul already bad? I think this goes to the final thoughts you were discussing about Galadriel and Elrond as you were finishing your podcast. Is she bad just because of the interaction with Sauron, or do we all have a dark side that is just waiting for the chance to take over, which is what happens to all the characters that kneel? I guess that's the whole point of the story, right? Corruption. Oh, by the way, thanks for all you do. Longtime listener, not one to write in.
Yeah, this is another one of these instances where let's not confuse the storyteller's intentions with Tolkien's actual purpose.
Yeah.
I have a bit of a letter here. After the final volume of Lord of the Rings came out, he got a lot of letters from readers either applauding or decrying the fact that Frodo failed and yet was allowed to live.
Mm-hmm.
And, some people said, he failed morally. He should not continue. He shouldn't be praised for what he did. He was a failure, quote unquote. And Tolkien, I think, rightly points out that Frodo was faced with experience that was beyond his ability to resist.
Mm.
And his whole point was all of us have a point beyond which we cannot resist. And here's an actual text from one of the letters he wrote about this. Believe me, it was not until I read this letter about Frodo's moral failings that I had myself any idea how topical such a situation might appear to be in 1956, which is, of course, shortly after the Second World War. I did not foresee that before the tale was published, we should enter a dark age in which the technique of torture and disruption of personality would rival that of Mordor and the Ring, and present us with the practical problem of honest men of goodwill broken down into apostates and traitors. I think Tolkien would absolutely be on the side of all the humans who are kneeling to Adar, because they had reached a breaking point. I picture Estrid and her mother, because she does allude to her mother at some point, kneeling with the prospect of becoming baby makers for orcs, not to put too fine a point on it.
Right.
And I think somehow Estrid's mother found a way, after they were both branded, for Estrid to escape while she remained behind. And that is the survivor guilt that Estrid is dealing with. This is purely speculation on my part. But, there's a whole bunch of stuff about oaths throughout Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion. And, the oath of Feanor was terrible because it was a bad oath. It was blasphemous. Yeah. And whether you kept it or broke it didn't matter. You were basically done. On the other hand, Elrond is unwilling to lay any oath on the Fellowship because he remembers what happened with the Oath of Feanor.
Right.
And, from a purely personal standpoint, Quakers' friends will say, we don't take oaths at all because the implication is, well, you never know, I might be lying to you unless I take an oath. And then, of course, I'm not lying.
Right.
Truthfulness in the heroic cultures that Tolkien was drawing from is a mark of nobility. It was a way for people to distinguish themselves from what they unfortunately considered as the lower classes. And so that's why you get a lot of emphasis on the importance of oaths, particularly the Rohirrim. And that, of course, reflects the whole Anglo-Saxon tradition of, taking oaths and keeping them and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that it is an indication that if you bend the knee, that doesn't mean you're evil. Basically, you may become evil, or you may be forced into doing evil that you did not want to do.
Yeah.
But I don't know. What do you think?
I think free will is at the core of Tolkien's work.
Excellent point.
The whole idea of free will in Tolkien's work is sort of free will within God's plan, right? So the ring would have been destroyed, and Gollum had a part to play in it.
Yes.
But Gollum had the choice of whether to willingly help Frodo or be forced into it by Eru's hand. And the former would have saved his soul. The latter did not.
Yeah,
and he chose evil in the end. So I think Tolkien believes you have the free will to pursue your own salvation, for lack of a better word. And yeah, again, this is Tolkien's worldview. I don't necessarily subscribe to this worldview.
Sure.
But I think Tolkien was very into like your personal free will, your personal journey, and sort of free will in the balance for your soul. And then God's plan will always have its way in the end. And Eru's plan in Tolkien's universe will always have its way. Spibimi.
Spibimi again. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think doing what you need to do to survive would be categorized as evil. Well,
it depends. It depends too, right? Like if you have to kill someone else to save your own life, I think that's a real that's a real like dilemma there, right? That is an evil act.
Unless you're a soldier.
I yes. Well, again, we can talk all about sanctioned killing, and that's a different podcast.
Well, I'm thinking in terms of how Tolkien might have viewed it at this point. Like,
sure.
I have my somewhat differing views on the whole thing, but
sure, yeah. But what I mean is, you can be placed in situations where I think self-interest doesn't and survival instinct does not trump morality. But there's also many instances where it does trump morality, I think. I'd rather swear if someone is going to kill me. I have a family. I would rather swear a false oath than be killed. Absolutely. I don't think that makes you a bad person. And I don't think Tolkien would have thought that either.
No, I don't think so either. But now let's frame it a little differently. Instead of asking what is Tolkien trying to say, what do we see the showrunners trying to say in all this?
That's a good question. I think they're making it so Estrid can be redeemable. Now, we haven't seen the finale, and we know in episode 7 she didn't appear. But I think they're going to give her the opportunity to be redeemed.
And I would also ask, what does she need to be redeemed from? I don't know of anything evil that she did at this point.
She has attacked Isildur like 3 times now.
Well, because she didn't know who he was. Because she has been forced into a position of survival.
But even after, I think the most
I'm not saying I would do it, but that,
I understand the first couple times. The time when...
Yeah, the third time with the supper monster.
Yeah. Well, I understand that. But what I mean is, I think that after he sets her free and she still goes for the sword, now I'm starting to not think that that's, I do think she has something to work out.
Sure. I mean, I think, she's done a lot of dark things and is kind of in a dark place and is struggling to survive in the ways that she knows.
Right.
And then now that her fiance has shown up, there may be another twist to all of that.
Yeah.
Well,
see, we haven't seen them in a while.
No, we haven't. And I'm not sure we will see them
straight away from that whole plot line.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Well, I expect that we will return at least to Pelargir in the 8th episode.
I think so too. I think
which may or may not mean Estrid will be showing up as well.
That's true, or perhaps the Pelargirites. I don't know. The citizens of Pelargir will be trying to ally with the wild men and win them over to their side instead of treat them as the enemy and treat them as Adar's people.
Yeah. As for Theo, because she does ask specifically about Theo, I don't think that his soul is already bad.
No.
I don't even think that he is attracted to evil. I do think he is attracted to power. And that is, of course, in Tolkien's language, a very, very risky thing, if not outright evil from the beginning. I don't think it is. But again, under his circumstance, the circumstance of his people, feeling powerless, feeling frustrated, feeling teenage boy angst, whatever sorts of things, he actually said of that sword, which made the mark that they're calling the brand.
Maybe he'll become the Witch King of Angstmar.
Well done. Well done.
Who knows?
5 points. But he said, when I held it, I felt powerful. And that is a very seductive feeling, as we know. And I think the big seducer in this whole season certainly demonstrates that.
I think you're right. Also, you know who else coveted power and turned out fine? Galadriel.
Well, there you go.
Right? She came to Middle Earth because she wanted her own realm.
Mm-hmm. And now we're back to your point of, free will and choice. And she does, in Lord of the Rings, we see her making the good choice, the right choice.
Right. Well, Marilyn, we're about halfway through the feedback, so let's take a quick break before we get back to this episode.
Okie doke.
Hey, Mark, I was listening to Paramore the other day, and it really made me think about the amygdala and the limbic system.
You just made those words up, didn't you?
What, Paramore?
We're the Nevermind the Music podcast, where one musician
and one psychologist
talk songwriting and the mind, one song at a time.
We'll hear everything from Green Day and Outkast
to Stevie Wonder and Dua Lipa.
And we mostly try to stay on topic.
Except for when we don't want to.
Nevermind the Music, wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back. It's time to talk about Tom Bombadil.
Oh, yes.
You want to read Sarah's?
Sure thing. Sarah L. sent us an email. I was also wondering, could Tom Bombadil be Tolkien's desire for all humans? It seems to me that he would love for humans to have a certain respect for the natural world, as Tom does. Mm-hmm. Maybe Tom is Tolkien?
What do you think? Is Tom a self-insert?
Right. Is Tom a Tommy Sue? I don't know what you'd call it. There's been a lot of people who speculated that Tom is Tolkien. And I would go so far as to say I think he definitely reflects Tolkien's views on a number of things. But I also know from the letters that Tolkien had a criticism for him in that he was a natural pacifist and therefore of little to no use, as he saw it, in dealing with these issues of power and domination and Sauron about to wipe over the world, and that he would be the last to survive and so forth. So he represents, for Tolkien, a couple of things. The embodiment of the spirit, natural spirit of the Berkshire countryside, for example. I think he represents really nothing more than himself. He's an enigma. And again, Tolkien said specifically that every world has enigmas in it, and Tom Bombadil is one of the enigmas of Middle Earth. So to try and say, what he is, that was something that was just never, other than eldest.
Yeah.
And my own personal read is he is a physical embodiment of the song when it was first sung, which does not mean that he is Eru, because he did not sing the song, he embodied it. So that's my best answer. What's yours?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for the Tom Bombadil as the embodiment of the Ainulindale, of the song, of the music of the Ainur. And yeah, that's where I'm at. And I'll give you my funny debunking of why Tom can't be Tolkien is that there's a whole thing where Tolkien says, I like walking and talking and I don't like doing them together. Right. And Tom is always talking and chatting and singing while he's walking.
Right. Good point. Good point.
All right. Well, we've got more Bombadil feedback. Vanessa's back with another voicemail.
Hi, everyone. Vanessa from San Jose again. Just was listening to your feedback podcast this week. Yay, my voicemail got on. Yay, I did it right. Anyway, I want to thank you guys, too, for you seem like you really enjoy your fans. And that's just such a delight. And again, you guys are awesome, and thank you for that and all that you do. Had a completely random thought pop into my head as I was listening to the podcast this week. I don't think that there's any lore that would support this idea that I know of. So please correct me if there is. But in the way that the elves and the men are the children of Iluvatar, and the dwarves are the children of Ale, I wonder if in some way, hobbits are the children of Tom Bombadil, because there's so many characteristics that they share. And I know hobbits are they represent Tolkien's childhood and that that idyllic rural kind of life that he just led as a child. That so I get that, but I was just thinking, just in terms of how much they just enjoy life and they just enjoy being in the moment, and they don't think about really the outside world. They think about their community, but that all seemed like traits that Tom Bombadil also shares. So anyway, I just thought I would throw that out there and get your thoughts on it. Have a great week, guys. Take care.
Well, thanks. Thank you so much, Vanessa, and thanks for the kind words. Also,
Yes.
I hope those sizzling fajitas were really good when they finished cooking. I'm just joking around. Marilyn, can I take a crack at this before you tell me
I
all
was
the
going
things
to
I'm
ask
missing?
you to do it first. You go
Okay.
first this time.
To me, there are only two sets of children of Iluvatar, elves and men, and then one exception that was made for Allay's creations, the dwarves. And every other sapien, every other sentient humanoid has to be an offshoot of those things. Is that right? So
I
hobbits
agree.
have to be an offshoot of men,
I
or
agree.
it just doesn't make sense.
Yes. No, I think you're absolutely right. And that also includes the Drodain, the Rouge. And, of course, the Dunlendings are more obvious. But yes, I completely agree with that hobbits are intended as you say, an offshoot of humans because they are so similar in their preferences to humans, to some humans. I mean, obviously, there's different hobbits that prefer different things. That doesn't mean that they don't reflect a lot of what Tom represents, because they're both interested in, rural aspects. They're not as much interested in book learning and knowledge. They're not as interested in craft and skill and so forth. The difference between them is hobbits are still engaging with the environment. They're still, to some degree, imposing their will on the environment. They're agriculturalists. Tom is more of a botanist.
A forager.
These are terms that Tolkien actually uses himself. Tom observes. He takes delight in the thing itself. He's a contemplative. The hobbits, they got to eat. They've moved into regions that were long regions that were tilled in the Second Age and the early Third Age by the folk Numenor that came north and by other humans. So their attitudes towards nature are somewhat different. I mean, the hobbits cut down a whole bunch of trees to keep the old forest from crossing the hedge that they built, which is also, of course, an imposition. Tom doesn't even cut down Old Man Willow.
Right.
So hobbits are much more interventionist than Tom for all their pastoral, idyllic approach to the countryside.
And also we know hobbits have that adventurous nature within them that Tom does not have.
Right. Most hobbits don't want to go out of the Shire, but there are the few exceptions who do. And thank goodness for, the rest of the world, right?
Right. Yeah, I do like this idea of Tom leaving his mark on the hobbits, though. I think we're going to see the hermit herd hobbits. The hermit herds hobbits. Also, wouldn't it be hilarious if Radagast comes and meets Tom Bombadil and they're just smoking pipe weed together and Radagast says, I could get used to this. And Tom goes, wait, that's not what I was trying to help you with. Never. And Radagast just gets caught up in the forest and we never see him again.
Well, it could be interesting. It certainly would be one interpretation.
I think we're going to see Tom help the hobbits get to the Shire, right? I think he's going to say, well, you know what? I'm about to head, now that this dark wizard business is behind us, let's head back by the Withy Windle where I was from. I'll show you the way. And I think Tom's going to bring them back to, or perhaps he'll just start walking and they'll follow.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. I mean, he seems to be pretty good at appearing and disappearing, so I don't know if he's interested in that long a journey. Embodied and on foot and leading a bunch of...
He'll draw him a map.
He might draw them a map or give them directions or whatever, but it does say that, they were facing this pretty severe obstacle of the Misty Mountains, and it wasn't until the shadow began to grow in Greenwood and humans began to populate the area more that they decided, all right, let's just see what's on the other side of these mountains. And that's what led them one by one, the three different groups, to to travel over and come into Bree and Audiador generally.
Right. Well, thank you for your voicemail, Vanessa. And we do enjoy our fans. I like to
We
think so.
absolutely do enjoy our fans. It's wonderful to have these conversations, if not face-to-face, then through all the different marvels of technology.
Yeah, and we've been encouraging people to do voicemails for like a year, and Vanessa's got it mastered now.
Vanessa's a champion.
So
Yes.
thank you, Vanessa. Please keep them coming. We love to hear
Go,
'em.
Vanessa. Go, Vanessa.
So the next section is everybody complaining about the Tom Bombadil line, the Gandalf line.
The line, yes.
The line.
Yes.
You want to start with Neil F.?
I will start with Neil F., who sent us an email. Hello, Hounds of Lore. That sounds very Rohirrim somehow. Thank you, Neil. I like that. In regards to the Tolkien quote with Bombadil, I thought they used that quote simply to code the stranger as Gandalf, something they seem to do once an episode he appears in this season. As soon as Bombadil said it, I thought, oh, Gandalf says this later. They must be saying Gandalf heard this echoed before. Just a thought. Honorable mention, bombs in his blue coat and yellow boots.
Yeah, Tolkien's quotes are bigger than his works, honestly, sometimes. Like,
Seriously.
For example, I went to my mother's house a few months ago, and I saw that she had, this probably wasn't a few months ago, this is probably years ago now. But anyway, I saw she had something with embroidered on it, not all those who wander are lost.
Mm-hmm.
She goes to me, isn't that beautiful? I said, absolutely. And it was when Tolkien wrote it too. And she was like, what? She had no idea it was from The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So I think Tolkien's quotes sometimes. I mean, we included an excerpt from a poem he wrote, Edith, in our wedding vows. You know that?
Yeah.
So
that's pretty amazing.
He's got great lines, and I guess they just really wanted to include it in the show.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with it, because there's a lot of speculation out there, including some of our emails to come here.
Yeah.
That was it a complete misconstruing of the meaning? Was it another hint that this is Gandalf?
Yeah, I think it's a hint that it's Gandalf.
Well, once again, Bombadil is being an enigma, which was his, according to Tolkien, his function in the world. So,
well,
I'm prepared to let it be a mystery until the showrunners show us more of what they're actually doing here.
Well, let's hear a defense of the line from E-Hoop.
Yes.
Maybe I'm less than 100% synced with y'all, but I'm seeing Bombadil's use of the line is highly appropriate and very cool story-wise. What I'm hearing is that he is using it from the other end, rather than you oughtn't kill folks without need. He's saying you can't save everyone against other needs. So you should stay on your path. That fits Tom B perfectly, in the sense we've seen of not messing with things needlessly. He could possibly save more foolish hobbits by chopping down Old Man Willow to weave withy baskets and sell at his Renaissance fair booth, or turn out all the Barrow-wights to return to their master, shriveled and formless, but they're all acting according to their natures, and that isn't his trip. Gandalf needs to get leveled up, and if he leaves to save Nori and Poppy, he could destroy all they have fought for and suffered for. Okay, yeah, it's totally straight out of Empire Strikes Back.
You think?
Yeah. Saying you can't save every last living thing, but if complete your training you do, you'll save a heck of a lot more than your two short friends. And this suggests a point of tension where Gandalf turns the line on its head, arriving at the conclusion that mercy and saving his friends is more important than any fate or destiny, and thus it enters his lexicon, but not as originally used. We'll see how that turns out, I guess. All in all, I'm very into this season thus far. I do like the idea that Gandalf heard that line and said, sure, but with a twist.
It's certainly possible. And, I mean, it also could come down to what we've been saying on other emails tonight about the whole thing of free will.
Right.
That I have always maintained that the way that Audu's plan is best manifested is when everybody is free to make their own choices.
Mm-hmm.
And they make choices that are not coerced by other wills. So they could be going for that and saying, okay, even Tom Bombadil, who's a bit strange, but seems to have wisdom that I lack, has
Right.
implied that I shouldn't save my friends, but I'm going to do that because that's my free will and that's my choice, and it turns out to be the right thing.
And, spoiler alert for The Empire Strikes Back from 1982, I think it was. It worked, and
That's
it was
exactly
a good thing.
what happens.
Right?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Is Luke makes the choice, and that is what makes him part of the light side, not training.
Right. And, the folks at the Prancing Pony podcast talked about the trolley problem and, do you save the one person who you know versus the, however many number of people in the trolley car by switching the tracks so that it hits your friend instead of whatever.
Well, the way the trolley problem was always presented to me was not about somebody you know. It was about, okay, you have like 5 people on the track, right? Or 3, multiple people on the track. And the train will hit them if you do nothing. The trolley will hit them, whatever. And then there's one person on the bypass.
Oh, I see.
And so you are actually harming fewer people if you change the direction of the train, but you're harming a person who was not in the wrong spot, who was actually following the rules.
Okay, well, that's a lot more complex.
I think it's more complex for sure. I don't know. I don't know if this is a trolley problem. I think it's more. I think it's just more methodology on how to save the world, right? Like, do you focus on individual needs or do you focus on big battles, right?
Well, I mean, how many times did we hear Nori say, I feel as though he came to us for a reason?
And I think that's right. And I think if he saves, I will be happy if he goes to save Nori. Yeah,
so will I.
I think that's his right decision. And I think that's how he will become worthy. Is that he nobody gets left behind. I think he learned that a lot from the Harfoots.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. Nobody walks alone. And he certainly heard them say that.
Wait, what if Tom's testing him here, right? Are you going to follow blindly my instructions, or are you going to think for yourself and do what you feel is right?
And is it more important to you to become a powerful wizard? Or is it more important for you to be someone who can rescue people who are in need?
Right. Well, Ehoop has another part of the email, or perhaps it was a second email, I'm not sure. Because Nancy does such a good job formatting things, I never know where one email starts and one ends.
It's true. For those of you who are listening to your email and say, is that exactly what I wrote? She sometimes does. she doesn't rewrite anything, don't get that impression, but she might just, drill down to the pith of it because,
she'll split it up to be thematically with other things. I think
right. And we don't want to be reading praises of ourselves all night long, too, because that gets boring after a while.
It sure does. Sure does. So, I want to talk about this. It is kind of a pivot into Hobbit lore. Would you like to take it, Marilyn? Ehoop's Hobbit email? And then when you get to the images, let's talk about it, because I think we only need the first line, the first image. I think we just need the line from that.
I'm 2 pods behind, so pardon me if it's been covered now, but here are my thoughts on a subject I haven't seen or heard covered. We've seen the Harfoots and now the Stoors, although they really got the names pretty backwards to my mind. I see it as nearly inevitable that the Fallowhides make an appearance, real question just being when. Will it be this season or later? I'm suspecting this season, just about the next time we return to the Stoors. When they do show up, I think the attached passages from the Scouring of the Shire probably give us a good hint of what we'll see. Since we're seeing primitive early versions and we've got Bombadil nearby, I'd like to see a lot of hunters in primitive camo, mud paint and bits of natural material on their heads, for instance. And maybe with some vaguely culty, but one-sided since Tom Bombadil wouldn't have it, relationship with Tom Bombadil. The masked hunters show up to bully the Stoors, do some damage, and then the Fallowhides pop up all around and start killing folk that need it. The hunters panic and scatter. Hopefully not reminiscent of Ewoks at all. Well, although I would cheerfully accept some cannibalism humor, maybe initially threatening to eat the stranger. Peace, Ehoop. So the image is from a text in which it says... it starts in the middle of the line, but I think the part that's relevant is, even in Bilbo's time, the strong Fallowhidish strain could still be noted among the greater families, such as the Tooks and the Masters of Buckland.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure that he took this text from concerning hobbits that appears at the beginning of Lord of the Rings. And I'm not altogether certain that I agree with that precise interpretation. I think the image of the Tooks in Tookland chasing out all the humans, because they can hide in their hills and they can shoot them with arrows and so on, might have influenced Ehoop's interpretation here a little bit. Because the Fallowhides, they were taller, they slimmer, they loved trees. And they also were the ones who dealt with elves. And they were skillful in language and song and handcrafts. They were not tillers, they were hunters. So in that part, I can see, that might chime with what Ehoop is writing here.
Right.
They were often leaders or clan chieftains in the other two groups, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily because of military prowess, for lack of a better word. I think there is a sense, anytime Tolkien mentions elves, you have to take notice because that usually means elves in connection with non-elvish people. Some kind of ennoblement or increase or improvement in stature, quote unquote nobility, farsightedness. So we know that the Tooks do have a fair bit of Fallowhide connection in them. But I don't know. I mean, think about Pippin and his whole response to all the battle stuff that was going on. I don't think he was there. I don't think he would have been there if he hadn't sworn allegiance to first Denethor and then to Faramir. It's just not... I don't know.
He sings a good battle hymn, though.
Something like that.
Over
Something
tomatoes.
Like that. Yeah. And golly, given that we're now through episode 7, we've only got one more episode this season. I really hope they don't introduce the Fallowhides because we've got enough to deal with already.
Well, not this season, but I would be fine with them introducing it next season. I mean, I've been surprised with how fast they're resolving the Eregion plotline.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact that it goes on for a couple hundred years in the books does not necessarily mean they're going to do it in
no, but I think
season
I could have totally
story.
seen them dragging out Eregion for 2 seasons, and then focusing on Numenor for a season, and then after Numenor, you know what I mean. I have to use my Frodo, my Frodo.
Then, keep your secrets.
Fair enough. Now, I think there's a lot more complexity to the Numenor story that we have yet to really start peeling back. And I know your feelings about Numenor is that we could have saved him until season 3.
I would have rather just split this up, but yeah.
Sure.
Well, that's all right. We're
it'll
all
be
here
interesting
now.
to see what happens.
I'm for Fallowhides in season 3. I'm just going to say it here.
All right.
That's my wager. There will be Fallowhides in season 3. You've convinced me, Ehoop. Digging too deep with the dwarves is Nancy's next topic, and she has an email from Kaiser. Hi, David, John, and Marilyn. Thoroughly enjoyed episode 5 and glad to see it maintaining the higher standard of season 2 so far. This season has me hooked in a way that never really happened in season 1. I've been thinking about the dwarves following this episode. If I recall from The Lord of the Rings, and I know you'll correct me if I'm wrong on lore, it has been a while since my last reading. There was not much said in The Lord of the Rings about the rings given to dwarves, and not much more about the dwarves themselves in the Third Age, other than their greed for riches, preoccupation with digging, and digging too deep. And so Gimli seems like an exceptional dwarf, one above it all. I don't remember much about the other dwarves at the Council of Elrond. It seems a shame to have been left with the impression of an entire race as greedy and reckless in pursuit of riches. So I really love the dimension being added by the show. We have seen them as fully fleshed out people through Disa and Doran 3 and 4. Ordinary cares and worries, strong and vulnerable, loving and difficult at times, relationships and friendships. Real people. The portrayal of the influence of the ring on Doran 3 may not be lore accurate, is it? Or maybe filling a lore hole, but I find it enormously satisfying. Greed has ever been his way, as Doran 4 says.
Uh,
But
greed has never been.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm misreading here. Greed has never been his way, as Doran 4 says, but we see him turning to greed now. The desire to dig more into the mountain for the jewels, ores, and gold, the ring tribute, and extorting the emissaries for the 6 other lords. So now we see a reason other than something innate to dwarves, corruption as a root of their bad reputation. Cue scene of Doran 3 strutting through the mines as Joan Jett blasts out. This is a great addition and massive credit to the writers in the jazz they are playing here. If Sauron had hoped that the Dwarven rings would corrupt them in a way he could dominate, we know that won't work, but in causing them to turn inwards, preoccupied with digging in dark places, he may not have them to serve under him. But they also won't be standing against him, effectively taking them off the board. Was this a happy accident for Sauron? Thank you for the continuing excellent coverage, Kaiser. You know, I'm just going to say, I think that the rings in general were not, we know that they were not specifically designed for the different races in the books,
right,
other than the elvish ones, which were pretty much just designed by Celebrimbor for the elves.
Right.
But I think the difference between the Mannish and Dwarven effects is that both of those ring types and the One Ring itself really sort of highlight and elevate the worst impulses of the races, or the inherent impulses of the races of Middle-earth. And so the dwarves, their fatal flaw is greed, right? That is something they... I guess it kind of twists what makes them good and turns it to evil, right? So they are really good at making these beautiful things, so the rings twist their impulses into an evil one of greed. And then the men, what are they good at? They're not really good at anything. No. No, but
that's a little harsh.
No, they're good. They're good at, advancing things and building civilizations and growth, and so it twisted into the power to dominate, right? The desire to dominate and control. And then the elves, they are serial longevists, right? So they preserve things with their rings. So I think it really it's not about the rings. It's more about the rings taking something that's part of the people wearing them and elevating it.
Yeah, I seem to remember a phrase in which Tolkien refers to the dwarven rings as awakening in them a lust for gold and for riches and so forth. Was it there to begin with? Possibly. Certainly the potential had to have been there. And as you say, it's so important, if we come from a lore base, to remember none of the rings were made specifically for anybody except the 3 elven rings. So if you view all of them as being sort of enhancement capacitors or something like that, obviously, because of his long-term plan of making the One Ring to dominate all the other rings, it failed insofar as the dwarves were not susceptible to being dominated.
Right.
They were susceptible to that greediness, which I don't think is the same thing as saying the whole race is inherently greedy from the get-go.
Sure. Yeah, that's why I tried to sort of hedge what I said originally, because I think the point is that they make these beautiful things and they desire to continue making that beauty for themselves and to share. Right. And the rings corrupt that desire to make beauty in the desire, and makes it the desire to hoard beauty. Right.
And in case of humans, obviously he has plenty to choose from, does Sauron. And so in that sense, he's choosing who he's going to give these rings to. And we know that at least 3 of them were Númenóreans of a particular bent that were already deep into domination. And presumably he picked the others according to what he saw as their potential to be willing to, receive his quote-unquote tutelage, which eventually becomes domination, to further dominate other people's.
Yeah. And, I think something true of men in Tolkien's universe and men in the real, and humans in the real world, I should say, is I think that a lot of people in Tolkien's universe especially really believe in that great man theory of history.
Unfortunately.
And so because the elves live forever, so they don't need to worry about being remembered because they're going to be around. But
Right.
men want to have immortality through doing great things. And so
Right.
Sauron twists that, revokes the gift of death, or doesn't revoke it, but keeps it at bay. And also, promises something of a legacy for these people, right? Promises that their names will be famous in a way, but perhaps they'll be infamous.
And possibly also just says to them, look, wear this ring and you'll live forever.
Yeah.
He doesn't say how they will live forever.
Yeah. Sauron's really good at perverting people's desires, right? Is really like distorting things beyond recognition.
Learning what it is they want most and giving it to them, but giving it to them in the most pernicious way possible.
Right. Well, it's time we talk about some Nazgul. Maureen D wrote in. You want to read that one?
Sure. There has naturally been a lot of speculation about who the Nazgul will be. Hasn't there just, Maureen? It will be interesting to see if the showrunners choose people who are all bad to the core, or if the power of the rings turns people who are on the cusp, like Eärien, further to evil. Can the rings only amplify inherent evil in men, or turn men evil? Would even a good man like Elrond quickly fall to the dark side if he accidentally put on a ring? Would it affect a man with no desire for power? And how much can the rings create that desire versus amplify what was already there? With Boromir, Gandalf, and Galadriel, it was the One Ring, so it works differently. Yes, and I'm glad, Maureen, that you pointed that out. I'm also wondering how rings designed for one species affect another. We saw an elf affected by a prototype of a ring designed for men. Do dwarf rings affect men and elves the same way? Presumably they are custom-made. So again, back to our earlier point, initially the rings were not made specifically for a specific race.
Yeah. So this is just a show creation. That's fine.
We have to separate out lore and show creation. And so that means that we're in the realm of speculation because the story is still unfolding.
Yeah. I as to the question about Elendil, would he fall to the dark side if he put on a ring? I don't think he would put on a ring. I understand the point of, would he accidentally put on a ring? Well, yeah. If it fell on his hand in Elijah Wood style from the movie, I think he'd just take it off. I think he wouldn't. I think that's the point, is someone who would put on a ring would be corrupted by it. Sure,
because they're already reaching for something beyond their natural estate.
Right.
Whatever lies Sauron is telling him.
Right. The whole point of the faithful is this acceptance of the gift of men. Right. Acceptance of that, acceptance of the Valar, and acceptance of their small place in Eru's greater plan. Whereas the Nazgul, the men who will become Nazgul, are clearly going to be people who do not want to be put in the position of just a small piece of the plan. They want to be a big player.
Right, and they want to live forever.
Do you really want to live forever?
Well, it's the old be careful what you ask for, you just might get it, isn't it?
Right. Well, Dyrenair, I think I'm saying that right. I hope so. Hi. I must address the lore surrounding Tirn Gorthad. There were dead men buried there thousands of years ago. The showrunners got that part right. The barrows were built in the First Age by the ancestors of the Edain migrating towards Beleriand. At the end of the Second Age, when the Dunedain established the North Kingdom of Arnor, they revered the barrows of their ancestors and continued to use them, burying their royalty there. However, there is nothing evil about Tirn Gorthad until the Great Plague of the Third Age during the Angmar War, when the last of the Dunedain of Cardolan, hiding in the barrows, perished of the plague. Only then does the Witch King send the Wight to inhabit their dead bodies buried in the barrows.
Certainly checks all the boxes as far as lore is concerned.
Yeah,
in the Second Age, what the showrunners are telling us is one of the many ways that Sauron's reawakening was stirring evil in all places was that he was somehow causing the spirits of the bodies to act in ways that they did not wish to act. Now, that runs contrary to a lot of lore about, free will and where the spirits of humans go when they die and how could he bring them back and so on and so on and so on. Let us remember, though, that Sauron is known as the necromancer, which is somebody who manages to reanimate dead bodies. So it is in his wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Let's just say that.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not they wanted to do it or not, I'm not sure how we're supposed to tell that, because I'm not really sure I could see much in the way of motivation on
Right.
the remnants of the faces of the whites that they were battling with.
Yeah, and also Tolkien was known to create werewolf by putting souls into the wrong bodies too, right?
Sure.
I think this is definitely a power of his. So I'm totally fine with him being the one awakening whites in the first age.
Not to mention Not to mention that the Dunedain have yet to establish their North Kingdom of Arnor. So these are still the mounds with the ancestors of the Edain.
Yeah.
As they were migrating west. So
look, it's not in the lore, right? It's not in the lore. No argument there. I think my point is it's fine that it's not in the lore. I think this is perfectly a fine jazz hands moment. Yeah.
I mean, again, depicting something that had never been depicted before visually. And
right, exactly.
They did a really bang-up job on it.
We're not getting another Lord of the Rings adaptation anytime soon. I think.
Yeah, I don't think we will.
And, that's fine, right? I think the Peter Jackson ones are really great. I do wish they got more in there, right? And so I'm fine with them bringing Tom Bombadil and Barrow Whites in. I wish they would leave some quotes out, but I'm fine with them bringing certain elements in that were not present in the Second Age.
Well, I wish that Peter Jackson had gotten more of Tolkien into one or two of his key moments, but that's another podcast altogether.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. You want to read Athena?
I will read Athena A. If the gift of man is death, isn't it sending mixed messages to then reward the Númenóreans with longer life? I know they also die, but giving Númenóreans a longer life has always felt to be playing into the fear of death that was developing in men and the envy of elves' longer life. This is just one piece of a larger part of why they were given the gift of the island of Númenor. Because they had asked for a place where they could live in peace. That was all they asked for. It was the Valar that extended their lives so that they could have more time to enjoy this and to develop their crafts and to be a flowering of humans that eventually, in their early days, brought a lot of good to the humans left behind on Middle-earth in terms of, wine and agriculture and whatever other kinds of things you want to talk about. And they were viewed as kings of men and revered, and so on and so on. It wasn't until, I don't know if it wasn't until Sauron was stirring, but it took a while. Yes, it was at the very beginnings when Sauron was stirring and Gil-galad wrote his letter that Aldarion brought back to his father, saying, I think the shadow is rising, that you get the first signs that the Númenóreans are saying, yeah, I'd kind of like to live a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But there was also the connection with the elves, the frequent visitors.
Yeah. To me, I think that's where I land now, is that it was more living in proximity to the elves and learning from the elves. And, they went paleo, right? They had their own dietary customs that were better than the men around them. They exercised a lot. And we do know that mannish lifespans were longer in the first age too, right? So they didn't magically get their lifespans extended. I think this was something that happened over time. To me, that's how I always read it these days.
And there's also the realization that back then, having had such close proximity with elves and also recognizing the reality of the Valar, they were not afraid of death as much as they later became. And
Right.
so they were prepared when they felt that, they were starting to slow down. They were prepared to trust and say, I'm willing to give this up now. I'm willing to yield this wonderful gift of my life in this paradise for the gift of being able to leave it
Right.
and not be stuck the way the elves are stuck. And at that point, I also assume a closer communication between elves and humans, and the humans probably better understood what the elves were realizing now.
Right.
The first age is over, and it was a long and hard age. Well, oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch more ages coming along, and we're stuck. We're not going anywhere. We can't even now, most of them, go to Valinor. The best we get is to go to Tol-Eressëa, which is, a sweet place, don't get us wrong. But we're just going to continue existing.
Right.
Until whenever Arda no longer exists. So, I mean, people who don't understand this, read the Athrabeth, which is a section, oh golly, which book is it in? It's in one of the histories of Middle-earth. I think it's Mordgoth's Ring, but it might be a different one. Where you have an elf and a human talking about this very question, who has the raw ordeal? And it also involves a elf-human relationship. So there's some of that in it as well.
Yeah, I don't think that this is just a straight up flick a switch. These people are living longer. It's the aqueducts. It's the aqueducts that extended their lifespans. Let's be honest.
I think it's the special wheat on the west side of the island myself. They brought some of Yavanna's wheat from Valinor, suitably altered for a mortal climate, and said, okay, here you go.
I like that.
Oh, and the sheep. The sheep were fabulous.
They just needed some good mutton.
Yeah, there you go.
Some good mutton, some aqueducts, and you're all set to live 400 years. All right, let's talk about music. Marilyn, we did a podcast on the music of Rings of Power at some point.
We absolutely did, and it was fun.
Feed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we're back, and Mark, the host of Nevermind the Music, he is here to talk to us about some comment that you made, Marilyn.
Yes, I did.
Here we go. Hey, y'all. This is a bit of a reach, but damn it, if I can't overthink sometimes. What am I here for? Got to make the grad school pay off eventually. In your episode 6 coverage, Marilyn said at the top that the main title theme was sighing. Well, musically, it kind of is. Mm-hmm. Sink it in your head that ba-da-da-da-da that opens the theme and comes back a few times. The highest and longest, and thus the most noticeable of those notes, are the two notes a half step apart, the smallest distance in this type of music, falling. For the past 400 years or so, a falling half steps has been referred to in a lot of Western art music as the sighing motive. I know Mark did a whole thing on the difference between motifs and motives in the first episode, so I don't want to get that wrong. Sorry, Mark. Also called the pianto or Mannheim sigh. It is used to represent grief or crying, especially when it repeats. This interval also opens the middle section of the piece, though it's less prominent. Is this on purpose? I don't know, but this is stuff that's pretty well understood by a lot of musicians, so the idea that Shore knows about this is not far-fetched at all. What do you think, Marilyn?
Well, it's interesting that you picked that theme for it, because I was thinking the as the sighing. Because it's descending instead of ascending.
No, I
and he does
understood
say that
you to talk about what Mark's talking about when you were talking about that.
It's a falling.
Yeah.
Right. It's a falling line. It's the falling line, which is sighing. So I think that's the actual melody that he's referring to. It was one I was referring to anyway, and I might even have sung it at the time. I can't remember now. But yeah, this is
Mark
great.
Talking about that one?
I think so. Mark, write in and tell us, please.
I don't think so. The highest and the longest are two notes half step apart. Da, 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 da. That's the half
step.
Yeah, that's what Mark's talking about.
All right.
I'm going to use my music degree, and I'm going to say that that's what Mark's talking about.
Well, you're absolutely right, because I kept thinking, da, 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 no, where's the half step in that? But that's what I was thinking.
There is a half step in that, but it's in the middle, and it's not the highest.
That was what I was thinking of as sighing. Mark, if you hear sighing in da 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 da, that's fine too.
Well, if you haven't, people, go check out Nevermind the Music. It's a very, very good podcast. I just listened to their episode 5. Fantastic. Mark had me laughing at his story. Nicole's got amazing, knowledge drops about psychology and how it relates to music, and I think that's a really wonderful combination. I'll talk about it more at the end in our programming notes, but please go check out Nevermind the Music. It's in our show notes at the link tree. Go subscribe. Good stuff. They are an affiliate of our network.
And whichever line he was talking about, I love all of the history about, they actually called it a sighing motif for the Mannheim sigh and so on and so on. I too took, in my undergraduate days, took a lot of music theory and so forth. I don't remember hearing about the Mannheim sigh, so maybe it was planted very deeply there and I just forgot. But that is cool.
Yeah, it might be more in the musicology track than the music theory track, right? There is music history within music theory too, but I think there's also all these like it's a really fine line. It's a really fine line when you start talking about the different studies of music. All right, Lorecast love. Want to talk about Ed's comment?
Ed74 from Patreon. I might have missed it. Did you cover the origin of the Lords of Adunier? That's kind of important, I think, because it's by their descent who should have been the first ruling queen. It wasn't due to male succession that the line of Elendil traces directly to Elros, and why, despite not having been kings of Numenor for many generations, they preserved the royal bloodline. Miriel's grandmother was granddaughter of the Lord of Andunier, which brought the faithful strain back to Tar Palantir, and made Miriel and Elendil something or other cousins, something or other removed. Yes, good point.
Mm-hmm.
And it is true. John, you make a point of saying, there have been both kings and queens in Numenor. That wasn't always the case. In the early days, there was actually one queen, I think, or the eldest child of one of the kings was a daughter, and I think her name was Silmarion. Don't at me if that's wrong, but I think that's who it was. And it was her descendants that became the Lords of Adunier, which now includes, of course, Elendil. And so he says here, Miriel's grandmother was granddaughter of the Lord of Adunier, which is presumably whoever Silmarion married. Or no, her son would have become the Lord of Andunier. And so, as he wrote here, brought the faithful strain back to Tar Palantir.
All right, well, good point. I appreciate that lore drop because I did not include that in our Numenorian stuff. I gotta see. Here's the thing with the Lorecast is I gotta balance it with like it has to be understandable,
of course,
and there's so much history. That's why I didn't really talk about Eldarion and Arendis.
Right, and interestingly enough, it is in Eldarion and Arendis that we hear that was the first ruling queen.
Okay.
Because they only had one child, and it was a daughter.
I haven't read Eldarion and Arendis in a long time. I don't think I've read it since season 1, actually. Rings of Power.
It's good, and it's also really interesting to read in the context of this show.
Yeah. Well, everyone's trying to get me to do Unfinished Tales after the Silmarillion, so I'll reread it when I do that.
Well, there you go.
All right. Mark has some compliments for you and David. Mark's back to say, just listen to the Lorecast on Orcs, and I have to say it might be a top 5 Lorehounds pod ever. Such an interesting conversation. Bonus content maybe, but seems pretty essential to me. Bravo, Marilyn and David. To those of you on the fence about the season pass, consider this a friendly push. Well, thanks, Mark, for the salesmanship. I promise I wouldn't be salesman until the outro, but you can be salesman for me.
That's really kind of you, Mark. I appreciate those. And I'm glad that the podcast episode spoke to you so well.
Yes, thank you, Mark. And great job to you and David. I'm so glad you guys were able to keep that going and not deprive everyone of a Lorecast for the week.
Oh, goodness. Yes, we can't not do our Lorecast.
Exactly.
And we were just really lucky that there was an awful lot of really, really interesting material out there to bring together and present to people.
Right.
So.
Want to close this out with Courtney's email about is Amazon too rich for merchandise?
Courtney writes in an email, "Hi everyone, I've been loving season 2 of The Rings of Power. Akin to Smaug's hoard, I love to collect Tolkien-related things. Especially with these terrible ad breaks at the worst times in the episodes of The Rings of Power, I thought I would buy hard copies of season 1 so I could watch them without interruption. However, I quickly found out they don't exist. I know physical media is being made less and less, but it made me realize there is practically no merchandise for The Rings of Power.
Mm-hmm.
No Funko Pop, no Lego sets, no CD vinyl sets for the wonderful music. I'm sure there is a special and very specific licensing involved, but I was curious if you had any insights into these kinds of rights with the Tolkien estate. I was most surprised to not see physical media for season 1 and the season 1 and 2 soundtracks. Thanks for all your wonderful coverage."
I think this is more of an Amazon thing than a Tolkien thing.
Yeah, it's really kind of surprising. I mean, we do have all kinds of Tolkien Lego sets for Peter Jackson.
Yeah, well, so right now, Embracer Group owns all the gaming merchandising rights. It's not the Tolkien estate right now.
Right.
For Lord of the Rings, at least, not for the Silmarillion and other extended works. But yeah, I think they could absolutely cut a deal with Embracer Group. Embracer Group's hurting for money right now too, so they'd probably jump on it. But I think this is more of an Amazon problem. I mean, look at The Expanse, The Boys, The Wheel of Time. Where's any of the merch for all that? They're just not doing it, and it's really you're right. It's weird. It's like they're passing up on free money. They need to call up the mouse and ask them how to do it.
Well, I'm afraid that the absence of CD or vinyl sets for the wonderful music reflects more the changing technology of music consumption. And I'm with you on this one. I still have a CD player, Courtney, and I still want to have those solid things. I want to have the DVDs so that I can replay these things and do all these things. Because, we ran into this problem when I was in the library world. How do you acquire permanently a streaming program?
Right.
How does that work? Never mind the fact that if you don't have CDs, you lose all the wonder and the beauty of the liner notes.
Yeah. They're kind of trying to bring it back with like special editions on Spotify and stuff like that. But you're right, it's different. It's very different.
It's not the same thing.
I know. When I was a kid, I remember I was so into Green Day, and I begged my dad to bring me to Best Buy to buy American Idiot. And he let me. I think they looked at me funny because I was like 11 years old and it was an explicit album. And I was like, I felt so scandalized, but I bought it anyway. And changed my life. And I probably wore that CD out. But it's really interesting how this has just evolved especially like I'm 30 years old now. This has gone from vinyl to streaming through CDs and cassettes and everything in my lifetime.
During your lifetime, yeah.
It's really weird.
Yeah, and I always used to go out and buy the DVDs right away when they were things that, I wanted to keep watching. But now, of course, people are finding, Netflix is dropping films, and it's like they've just disappeared altogether.
I'm very concerned about that because we had Westworld completely dropped from HBO. You can't watch it anymore. And then Willow was dropped by Disney, and you can't buy it on DVD or watch it on Disney.
Yeah.
And so, it's very concerning. Very, very concerning.
I guess people are not really all that interested in their survival into the future because goodness knows format migration is a real thing.
Yep.
And the idea that, you've put all your money into this stuff and all you're interested in is the profit here and now, and they're not interested in legacy.
A historian's going to think that we just like decorated Frisbees and threw them around. An archaeologist is going to discover CDs.
Well, I hope the archaeologist has a little bit more connection with the historians than that.
Haven't you seen Foundation?
Mistake.
I don't know about it.
Well, I have.
All right. Well, everyone, it's been fun. I think it's time to wrap up this podcast. Let's talk programming notes quick. So everyone gather round to hear what's coming on the Lorehounds Network. This is going to come out after our episode 7 coverage, so you should have already been able to hear that. We did a full recap, I think over 2 hours, so plenty of content over there. We are also doing a Lorecast this week on the Circle of Light, so stick around for that. And that's for Patreon Supercast subscribers and season pass holders. On other shows, Agatha All Along is in full swing. David and John are going to be covering episode 3 because Alicia's out of town. And Alicia and Brandon already put out their podcast on Beetlejuice. Don't say it a third time. Which is the sequel to the original movie. And it was a lot of fun. I listened to their podcast. Really great stuff. Then David's been very busy this week. That's why I think part of why he needs a break so that he can can get some stuff done. He also did a podcast with John on The Penguin. So they did an instant reaction to episode 1. And apparently they really liked it. So very cool. On the Patreon Supercast feed, this is for recurring subscribers only. 11Z's number 5 on Prey, the 2022 Predator movie, is available probably this weekend. We'll see. Alicia's busy right now, I know. So we'll see when that comes out, but soon. Affiliates. Nevermind the Music is out with a new episode this week. Nevermind the Music, if you haven't heard me do my spiel about it before, it is a wonderful podcast with 2 professors, one of music, one of psychology, and they are going crazy talking about the intersection between the two with pop music. So they did Paramore in their first episode. This most recent episode, they did True by Spandau Ballet and the Money Notes of a Middle School Dance. So that's that that you probably have heard a million times in your life in every romantic scene in a movie ever.
Were they the ones that started that?
What do you mean?
Started the whole
Oh, maybe. I don't know. But they they go deep into it. Mark had me laughing a lot on this podcast, and Nicole's got a lot of great knowledge drops about sort of what makes a middle school dance a middle school dance. Really great podcast, so go check it out. Radioactive Ramblings is going to be back this week soon. They are going to be, and it might be out by the time this comes out, I don't know. But on for Fallout lore, they're on episode 4 of their Fallout lore coverage on the Wasteland Bestiary. So check that out for more Fallout goodies. And so every now and then when I get tired, my Long Island starts to come out. I'm like, Fallout. You Fallout lore.
You Long Islander.
My Long Islander. Give me a bagel.
We should schmear.
Give me some prosciutto. I used to do a farmer's market for a coffee shop I worked out on Long Island. And there was this guy who was a baker, and he made prosciutto bread. And he would go, hey, you want my prosciutto bread? Come get my prosciutto bread. $5, $5. And it was very Long Island. It was like it was the epitome of Long Island to me.
Interesting. Now I'm thinking of Cut Me on Throat Dibbler from the Discworld.
Oh, yeah, that's funny. Okay, and then Wool Shift Dust, Alicia's back with her book club. Check out her feed for details on that, but she's covering parts 3 and 4 of Dust, the last book in the Wool Shift Dust Silo series. All right.
Wow.
A lot of stuff here.
Busy people.
Busy people indeed. These schedules are getting harder and harder to write because there's so much in them.
I believe you.
So let's just do our quick thank yous before we head out of here. I don't have any music lined up, so we're gonna have. Well, you know what? I'm on my laptop instead of my main computer tonight, so I don't have all my goodies. But I do have the names in front of me. So I'm going to thank the Discord server boosters: Gnarls, Aaron K, Tiller the Thriller, Dorga the Ninjas, Duve71, Captain Gingy 56, Athena A, Adrian. Why am I saying Adrian? Tina, Lestu, Nancy M, and Ghost of Perdition. Then our lore masters: Some Martian, Michael G, Michelle E, David W, Brian P, SC, Peter OH, Bettina W, Adam S, Nancy M, Duve71, Brian 8063, Frederick H, Sarah L, Gareth C, Eric F, Matthew M, Sarah M, DJ Miwa, Andrew B, Kwang Yu, Deadeye Jedi Bob, Nathan T, Alex V, Aaron T, Sub-Zero, Aaron K, Dally V, Mothership 61, Gnarls, Kathy W, Listu, Jeffrey B, Elisa U, Fossey U, Neil F, Ben B, Charlotte M, and Adrian always last. Thank you all. Thank you for all your support. Still time to get the season pass if you want to hop on that, or if you want to hop on a recurring subscription so you can hear Second Breakfast, Elevensies, and all the other Patreon and Supercast goodies.
Get 2 or 3 times your material.
It's quite a lot of material for a pretty good deal, I gotta say.
Yeah,
and
sure. Thank you for all that support.
Thank you, everyone. Marilyn, any last words for the podcast?
I think we've said all there is to say for this one, and looking forward to whatever we might be saying on the next couple.
All right. Well,
and maybe next time I'll even be brave enough and do some kind of music background if you start reading names without music accompaniment.
Okay. Oh, you should do it. All right. Well, that's it, folks. And remember, the Arkenstone should have been a Silmaril.
Oh.
The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by the Lorehounds. You can send questions and feedback and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all Lorehounds podcasts at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thanks for listening.